All right, welcome to this PBC exam review. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that can be, well, pretty distressing for patients and honestly kind of tricky on an exam: persistent hiccups. We're going to break down everything you need to know from diagnosis all the way to treatment. Okay, let's kick things off with a clinical scenario. You know the kind of thing you're definitely going to see. Imagine this. You have a patient, they've had hiccups for 30 days straight. What's your first-line therapy? This is exactly the kind of question we need to be prepared to answer, so let's break down the evidence together. So here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to walk through this just like you would in a real clinical setting, from figuring out what's going on all the way to treatment. We'll hit all the key points you're going to need. All right, let's dive into our first section. First things first, we've got to get the definitions straight. This is absolutely crucial because, think about it, how you define the problem, that's going to dictate your entire approach. And we'll also look at the triggers. Okay, let's get the terminology down because this is fundamental. It all comes down to duration, right? If hiccups last anywhere from 2 to 30 days, we're calling that persistent. But if they go on for more than a month, now we're in intractable territory. And knowing that difference is what tells us how urgently we need to act and how deep we need to dig. Now here's where it gets really interesting: the sheer number of things that can cause this. I mean, hiccups aren't just some minor annoyance, right? They can actually be a sign of something much bigger going on. We're talking about anything from metabolic issues to infections like COVID-19, all the way to CNS abnormalities or problems with the diaphragm or abdomen. And you can see why a really thorough investigation is so important. Oh, and it's also worth noting, this tends to happen more often in older men. Okay, exam tip. You're going to want to pay close attention to this one. Drug-induced causes are a super high-yield topic. So if you see a question and it mentions a patient with persistent hiccups that just started, what's the first thing you do? You scan that med list. The big 3 culprits to look for are alcohol, corticosteroids, and be on the lookout for dexamethasone specifically, and of course, benzodiazepines. All right, so let's move on. We've talked about what hiccups are and what might be causing them. Now, let's get into what we're actually trying to achieve and how we figure out what's going on. Let's talk goals and investigations. So what are we trying to accomplish here? Well, the goals are pretty straightforward, but they're really important. It's not just about, stopping the hiccup itself. We want to decrease how often they happen, how intense they are, and really improve all those other things that get messed up, like insomnia, weight loss, even depression. And a huge goal, of course, is to make sure they don't come back. And this workflow, this is just perfect. It shows you the logical steps. You always start with a really targeted history and a physical exam. You're looking for any clues: vagus nerve irritation, maybe something GI related. If that doesn't give you answers, then you move on to some initial labs and a chest x-ray. Only then, if you still don't have a cause, do you think about more advanced stuff like an endoscopy or a CT scan. The key takeaway here is this: if you do all this and you still don't have a cause, that's your green light to start a therapeutic trial with medication. Okay, before we jump into the pharmacy side of things, let's quickly touch on non-pharmacologic management. It's good to know about these because patients might ask. But we also need to be really clear on what the evidence actually says, or doesn't say. So here's the bottom line. You've got all these anecdotal things people try, like holding your breath or stimulating the pharynx. But for persistent hiccups, there's just no good evidence. If you've got gastric distension, sure, gastric aspiration might be worth a shot. Acupuncture, the studies are pretty poor quality. The things that do have a high success rate, like a continuous cervical epidural block or even disrupting the phrenic nerve, well, these are pretty invasive, right? They're really last resort options for when absolutely everything else has failed. All right, now for the part we've all been waiting for: the pharmacotherapy. This is the real meat and potatoes for the exam. We're going to talk about the key players here: dopamine antagonists and muscle relaxants. But first, a really, really important caveat. The evidence for any of these drugs, it's pretty limited. We're mostly working off case reports and small studies. There's no single magic bullet that's proven to be better than anything else. So what does that mean for us? It means treatment is often a process of trial and error, and our choice is going to be guided by things like the patient's other conditions and the side effect profile of the drug. This table right here is pure gold for your studies. Look at these dopamine antagonists. See the pattern in the adverse effects? Anticholinergic effects, EPS, hypotension, sedation, QTC prolongation. These are your classic exam differentiators. Chlorpromazine, think of that as the old school historical first-line agent. Haloperidol is great to remember because you've got an IM formulation. And metoclopramide, well, it's got a small RCT under its belt and that bonus effect of enhancing gastric emptying. Next up, we have baclofen. Now, this one is a big deal. Why? Because it's a muscle relaxant that actually has some solid evidence behind it. We're talking 2 randomized, placebo-controlled, double-blind trials that found it was effective for intractable hiccups. That makes it a really important player in our toolbox. And here is the absolute must-know classic exam question about baclofen. You have got to remember this. It's excreted by the kidneys. So if your patient has renal failure, you have to slash that dose. We're talking much, much lower doses to avoid some serious neurotoxicity. This is a huge safety point. Okay, let's quickly run through some of the other drugs you might see mentioned, and then we'll get to a really critical point, a class of drugs you absolutely want to avoid. So you might see drugs like amantadine, gabapentin, or valproic acid used. These are all based on case reports or small series, so the evidence is pretty weak. Think of these as your second or third line options, the things you might try when the main agents haven't worked out. Now, this is a huge clinical warning. You need to burn this into your brain. Avoid benzodiazepines. Remember how we said they can cause hiccups? Well, it turns out they can also make them worse. So for treatment, they're a definite no-go. All right, we're in the home stretch. We've picked a drug, we've started it, now what? Let's talk about the practical stuff. How long do we try it for, and how do we stop it? This timeline is your playbook. So step 1, you start the therapy. If a drug is going to work, you should see results pretty fast, sometimes within hours. Step 2, and this is a key clinical pearl, you assess at 3 days. If it's not working by then, it's probably not going to. Time to stop and switch to something else. If it is working, great. After a few days of success, you can start to slowly taper it down. And if the hiccups come back, well, then your goal is to find that lowest possible dose that keeps them under control. And let's wrap it all up with this final thought question. How would your first choice of drug change for an 80-year-old with stage 4 chronic kidney disease versus a healthy 45-year-old? See, for the older patient with CKD, you'd be super cautious with baclofen, right? Because of that renal clearance we talked about. But for the healthy younger patient, your options are way more open. And that is the level of clinical thinking you need to bring to your exam and, more importantly, to your future practice.